If you like big smartphones, this is a device you'll want to check out. I'm Aaron Baker from PhoneDog.com, and in addition to the Galaxy Note 3, the Nokia Lumia 1520, HTC has a big old one, literally, on the block. It's the HTC One Max, a new supersized smartphone from Sprint and from Verizon in the States, and we're going to take a look in the full video review. If you like the HTC One, but you've always thought to yourself, man, I wish I had a phone the size of the Xperia Z Ultra or Galaxy Note 3, but with the form factor of the HTC One, the One Max is going to be your device. There's a lot to like about HTC's newest device, and it completes the trio, if you will, of HTC One smartphones. You've got the Mini, the flagship HTC One, and now the HTC One Max. Coming very soon, available on Sprint now, coming very soon to Verizon Wireless, and it's got a giant body, a big display, and there's a lot to like about this HTC smartphone, and it carries over some design things from the HTC One, which has been their flagship for some time. Before I get too far into that, special thanks to HTC for sending us over a review unit, and also thanks to our partners at Best Buy Mobile. They give us the HTC One Max and other devices that we give to you for free on the site at PhoneDog.com. So thanks to them. When you walk into Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out working, so whether you get the Sprint version or the Verizon version, they'll make sure you're good to go, your carrier settings are all set up, your phone settings are good to go, your messaging is set up, and you're ready to rock and roll out the door, thanks to the boys in blue. But the HTC One Max has a lot to like here. Specifications-wise, very similar in a lot of ways to the HTC One. It's packing a 1.7 gigahertz quad-core Snapdragon 600 CPU, 2 gigabytes of RAM, a 5.9-inch 1080p HD display, so a much bigger display, 4 ultra-pixel camera on the back, same as the HTC One, and it's got a big battery in the back as well. It's non-removable, but it is 3,400 milliamp hours. Now, when you look at the design language here, you'll notice immediately this has more of a design language almost of the HTC One Mini than it does the flagship HTC One. The plastic on the sides is a little bit different, a little bit more reminiscent of the HTC One Mini, but there are some changes still, which we'll talk about in just a second. But also, this is running Android 4.3 with HTC Sense version 5.5, and it has a 2.1 megapixel front-facing camera. So there's no doubt about it. This is a big smartphone. It's noticeably bigger, as far as I'm concerned, in day-to-day use, noticeably bigger than the Galaxy Note 3 even, and still right on par with something like the Oppo N1. It's a little bit taller than the Galaxy Note 3 if you have that for kind of a size comparison purpose here. A little bit bigger, and it does have that fingerprint scanner on the back, which we'll talk about a little bit later. You'll notice that there is a cover here on the side that does remove. It accesses the micro SIM card and accesses the micro SD card slot, but notice the battery is still not removable. But if you want to get back here to access the battery, you can do that, or excuse me, the micro SD card, you can do that by removing it rather from the side. Now, you'll notice immediately here, volume rocker on the right side, same spot. Power button has been moved to below the volume rocker from up top rather, because when you're holding this, it's kind of hard to go up top and try to press that power button. So they moved it to the side for accessibility purposes. 3.5 millimeter headphone jack up top with your IR blaster, so still for HTC's TV app, you got that, and of course a micro USB charging port down here at the bottom. But still, Android 4.3, Sense 5.5. The overall experience here is very similar. Boom sound speakers on the front, very similar to what you would experience with the HTC One. So maybe if you're coming from that device, or you've worked with it before, used it before, and you're thinking, hey, maybe I'll get an HTC One Max, you'll notice the experience is similar with a few key differences, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Obviously, the app drawer looks very similar on the Sprint version, which is what is here. This is a Sprint Spark device, so once Sprint Spark is available in your respective market, you can take advantage of that. But a couple of goodies out of the box here. One Weather, Bacon Reader, CBS Sports, of course the Google integration, Key VPN, Lumen Toolbar, Lookout, Kid Mode, and then just scrolling down through here and kind of looking pretty briefly. Scout, SoundHound, Sprint Music Plus, Sprint TV and Movies, Sprint Zone, TuneIn Radio, and then of course all the YouTube stuff, and Sprint Worldwide, all the YouTube stuff. It's like an old man. All the YouTube kids stuff that they listen to. It's crazy. That's crazy, I tell you. And of course, Blink feed here as well. And you notice highlights, and I've got, of course, Google Plus integration, calendar, gallery, and TV. So for example, calendars in here, I'm updating that. I've got TV. And then I can go into my highlights as well, which is what you typically see with something like a traditional Blink feed look and feel here. You'll see the application loaded up, or the actual area here loaded up. You can see the individual stories. And you can come up here at the top to highlights and go back over here like I was just showing you and go into settings. So you'll notice the user interface here is different from what you would see on the HTC One. You notice in the old version, it was right up here at the top. Instead over here now, it's right here, and I can go to topics and services, for example, and either connect with Facebook, or I can select interests on my own and come in here to services and apps. I can come into featured headlines if I want to. So they definitely expanded this out. You can see the technology section is a little bit more expanded. And down here, for example, technology and science, I can click on that. I love gadgets, so I love mobile, I love internet, I love the internet. So I click on those and have those highlighted in my blink feed as well. So of course the weather is still here at the top, but overall experience is very similar. You've got your home screens here as well. Blink feed is on. You can actually turn off blink feed in Sense 5.5. So you've got that option. Of course, home screens as well. So a total of 5 home screens in addition to blink feed to make for 6 total home screens in Sense 5.5 rather. That's a change as well. Back here, home button down at the bottom. And of course, let's take a look at the internet browser here and see how it performs. We'll load up phonedog.com and see how it performs. And you can see it's running right now on Sprint 3G. Now Sprint's changed around their network indicator. You'll notice it with the 3G. The LTE one is super interesting. It's kind of this spinning wheel, which for whatever reason LTE is not working in my office. Dallas is very much an LTE market for Sprint, but not working in this respective area. But you can see ported to landscape nice and fast, and you have the same Sense keyboard that you're probably familiar with over on the HTC One. Difference here, depending on the version, you do have the arrow buttons at the bottom as well. So nice big keyboard, easy to type in portrait. You'll notice in landscape mode, very easy to type on. It goes from edge to edge of the display, which is quite nice in comparison to something like a Windows Phone 8 device, which much to my chagrin still does not do that. So keep that in mind. So I'll go back home here and take a look at messaging on that note. And I'll load up a spare text message. You can see how it looks. Of course, keyboard's still here. And portrait to landscape is nice and fast. So the overall consumption experience here, very similar to what you would see on the HTC One or the One Mini with some minor changes like that. I also want to highlight this app called Scribble, and I talked about this in the unboxing and the first impressions. I talked about the opportunity, and we'll talk more about this in part 2, but the opportunity that HTC had and even Nokia had with the Lumia 1520. I feel like it was a missed opportunity. You've got a big screen device here. You need some software to go with that big screen. I mean, you know, it's kind of one of those one-size-fits-all things is not the case here, and you know, it's the same version of Sense, essentially, running on the One Max as it is on the HTC One. There's no real differentiator where it's like, hey, we've got a nice big display that's almost 6 inches. Let's change it up and split the screen and do multitasking or something like that. So I think there was a missed opportunity in the software department, but one thing I will give them credit for is this, the Scribble application. So you can take a look here, and I was testing this out, just having some fun with it. So I've got a picture that I inserted, and I can go down here and paint. So I've got some options here to draw on the screen. That said, it's not nearly as, for me, functional in day-to-day use as something like the Note 3, which I often praise it because it is kind of a leader in the class in terms of content consumption and content creation. So that's why I often will talk about that one, because the S Pen does do a good job. The handwriting recognition is great. And you've got some of that over here. You'll notice, for example, I'll go down here and draw hey, and it'll insert it right there, and it inserts it in my, I almost said font, in my handwriting, but still a little bit smaller, a little bit less functional. And you can, of course, insert pictures, but not nearly as functional as the S Pen, or screenshots, or sending those, or using the S Pen to cut around. And surprisingly, even though some of you may look at that as a gimmick, a lot of people use that on a regular basis. I am forever doing that, cutting stuff out and sending it to friends or family and saying, hey, take a look at this picture or this article or something like that. I think there's a lot of use for that in a big screen device, and I'm kind of I'm frustrated, if you will, that that's not included in some of these other large screen devices. So this is definitely a step forward. Would love to see more, perhaps in a future version of Sense from HTC. Keep it locked on phonedog.com for part 2. We'll talk more about the software. We'll run a speed test, quadrant standard, and more. So keep it locked right here.